Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for all the audience across the globe. I take an immense pleasure to introduce this wonderful panel to discuss on fourth industry revolution. And I am here, the moderator Abhinav Jori, director and practice head from ENY with digital consulting business. So I'm sure next 30 minutes are going to be huge learning from the greatest topic of fourth industry revolution, the communications between man and machinery. Abhinav, I'm passing on it to you to take it over. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Subbu, and greetings to everyone wherever you have joined from. A very warm welcome. My name is Abhinav, and I will be moderating the next 30 minutes for this session. And let me just quickly welcome my all panelists. I'm joined by Devita. Devita, good afternoon. Welcome to the panel. And Devita is founder and CEO for VU Televisions. I'm also joined by Josh Forger, and Josh, a very warm welcome to the panel. And he's co-chairman task force for mobile manufacturing India. And lastly, very pleased to have Alok. Alok, a very warm welcome to the session again. He's the CEO and senior managing director for DCM Shriram India Limited. So thank you for joining in. Thank you for your time. Um, Rita, let me start with you. The kind of sector and the industry you run for, it'll be fantastic to know that how, in the context of your business, how some of these new age technologies, especially which are at the core of the industry revolution, be it about AI, be it about data-driven stuff, even the 3D printing, how this some of them have impacted your business, and particularly for VU televisions, what kind of big bets are you taking?
Okay, well, I will say that for us as a company at View, innovation is pretty much at the core and at the essence that we do. So when I started out the company back in 2006, we started a lab called the View NPD Lab, the New Product Development Lab, which was based on the human factors approach of MIT Media Lab. And what that does is that it puts smaller teams with multidisciplinary expertise to create more customer centric and futuristic products.
Right.
So in the past few years, we are of course the number one Indian-owned TV brand in the world today. We've been able to outdo the competition again and again because of our ability to innovate for customers. However, very often what happens is, the mindset has been that most great innovation comes from very large companies, comes from companies which have major R&D. Whereas I would say that innovation is moving more from a game of might and a game of size through data, through all these tools available, to more of an art form where you really have to use the data available, look at different permutations, combinations, look at the possibilities that AI brings you, and make products which are ahead of competition and take bets on those. So
Yeah.
within our labs, we always have, I can say, like a lineup of products in development. A lot of them are using data, a lot of them are using technology to come up with what we think is going to be the future requirement for the customer, whether it's for his lifestyle or his work style. And this is something that we've been doing from day one. So it's not like that I have to integrate it within my business. The good part is that with the number of tools which are available, with the number of data that's available, and with AI, the sort of permutations and combinations that we find, probably the human approach, maybe the team member can only think of so many limits.
That's
When it
right.
comes to using technology, it's kind of limitless with the kind of options that they can find. The second part is also the fact that prototyping becomes that much cheaper, which is very important when you're making anything from a car to a computer to a television, which is a very hardware product. So our investments in creating prototypes also reduce. The most important thing that I find most interesting when it comes to really blending AI with the work that we do is, really the beauty of the experience of the product. So
Mhm.
sometimes when products are made, it's a very scientific approach always to see how to make something efficient, how to make something faster. But, today for all of us, technology has become a part of our lives. And technology really allows you here to think of combinations of how it can mimic a human lifestyle or human mind to create the experience. I'll give you an example. The McLaren team actually used AI to make the fastest Formula One car, and what they came up with was a design that actually very much resembled a cheetah. And let me tell you, this was something that the machines came up with, and the cheetah is the fastest animal out there. So I think for us at View to answer this question in a short format, it gives us a great advantage because it's both sort of creative disruption in the innovation that we do, in bringing efficiency, of course, to us and being able to test the product, come up with permutations, combinations, and also make something which, even though made by machines, is actually more human and more
Yeah.
centric to human work or lifestyle experience.
That's great, Devita. Then, one of the things which also comes to my mind is in often product production, one of the great enabler for people to think, innovate, and design better human-centric designs and products as well. It's important that we democratize the use of technology at the same time and also control it so that it doesn't take a tangent which we really don't want to. It'll be great to know some of your insights. How have you democratized, make technology available to your employees so that they can, the one side they can think through as well, but also know where to limit it.
Well, there are multiple questions that you've asked out here. One is that what is the access of technology that we give to our
Yeah.
teams? The second is, how do we use technology to really come up with, solutions that we're looking for? So
And
you
most
can't.
importantly, how do we limit and control that people don't really end up on the wrong side of the.
So you know what? Actually, now that you asked me this question, it takes me back to my days in California when
Yeah.
I was studying management of technology at UC Berkeley, and a professor made us watch this very important scene from Jurassic Park, the first one, in which the person said, "We were so busy thinking if we could, we didn't stop to think if we should." So I would say that, as a company, we're always, as technical people, we're always thinking the possibilities of what technology can do. We don't stop to think, hey, is this something that we should do? Is it ethical? Is it sustainable? Is it efficient? Is it, digressing from company goals? And I would say that is where leadership comes in. So at some point, of course, you have to give the right tools to your team and have faith that they will use it for the right purpose. But I think it's also important for leaders to then bring machine learning with human intuition and come in and say, okay, guys, let's focus. This is what we're working towards. Because today, the world of technology is so endless. And when you work with technical people, they tend to obviously get driven by what's the newest thing. We
Right.
keep trying to bring them back to business goals and say, great idea, but is this a product that someone's going to buy? There's no point of making a great product that doesn't reach the market. So I think when we do R&D, we also involve a large part of our entire business development and sales team to say, great idea, but is this usable? Is it sellable? Is it something that people can understand easily? And I would say that when it comes to deploying technology, you have to add the layer of the real world with it to make sure that you're using technology to give you a good business outcome, unless you're just a lab taking ideas, making ideas for someone else. For a company like us, at the end of the day, it of course boils down to the dollar to make sure all
Absolutely.
the effort that
Yeah.
we put in, did people buy, did they like it, and did they buy again?
Yeah. Great insight. Thanks, Devita. And while you operationalize most of the aspects on how companies have strategized, especially with you telecom, Josh, I want to take an opportunity with you, wherein, especially the role what you play, very core, especially at the national level. Some of the policies, the way the government would think about, would really have a larger impact on it. I would want your insights into it. That when businesses they want to realize the strategy of adopting, infusing new age technologies into their business. How have they done it? And in your own experiences, how have you seen it, especially from the role you play?
Thanks, Abhinav. I think it's a good question, and clearly the automation or the digitization has come a long way. I remember during my days in Texas in '93, we were talking about neural networks and programming. We worked on a research thing called dynamically configurable assembly cell. Is what we did. Back when. Now, what happened globally was that there was a lot of high tech. Going back 20 years ago,
Yeah.
I had the entire phone assembly automated. Almost the automation level was about 90%. But then the automation moved to Asia, India, and so on and so forth. Automation kind of dropped, right? But now I see the resurgence coming back, and The good news is that the last 6 years, the government of India has been on a very positive track, from a policy standpoint. So we picked mobile phones as the largest category. We introduced a program called Face Manufacturing Program, which was really to promote manufacturing in India. So that really triggered that. Earlier this year, the Honorable Prime Minister launched the first PLI scheme, the Production Linked Incentive Scheme, which really pushed the how would I say that, the promotion of manufacturing and the supply chain development in the country. Now, I think a combination of PMP and PLI has really done extremely well from a manufacturing standpoint. But truly, what happens is when you want to mature and develop more value, I think the problem we have is that we have certain elements missing. And here's where I think the government has, and I really think Atmanirbhar Bharat is probably one of the most profound programs I've ever seen. And so I was a Make in India guy. Now I've really shifted to Atmanirbhar Bharat. Of course, it took me about a couple of months to pronounce it, but really, that's the 12 words I know in Hindi, But to me, it's like, I think it's three components, at least in the electronic space. And I believe the government gets it, especially Ministry of Electronics is really on the ball on this. The Secretary, Ajay Sani Saab, Saurabh ji, all of them are really on the ball, working closely, with us in ICEA in driving this. See, it's really three things. I think manufacturing supply chain is great, but that's really number three. Number one is R&D, right? It's design and development. And I mean, here's where you do your build. So you work with somebody, like Devita, you get the concept and you're able to really productize that and the ability to really scale that, doing the builds and whatnot. Now, the second piece of this pie, which is important, is the machines. So if you don't know the process control, the instrumentation to control that, if all of that is imported, you're never going to control that. Be it simple mechanical or semicon machines, right? So I call that Indian machines. So design development, Indian machines, and then of course manufacturing supply chain. Now the good news is that manufacturing is addressed. Now we are working with the government to see how to promote the other two pieces, which I think are very important when we look at this fourth industrial revolution. And I think India is probably reasonably well positioned. I mean, we should not assume that we have a leadership position here, but definitely the opportunity is there, given a lot of the puzzle pieces are around sometimes in scale, sometimes really in hunger, with our people. So I really think that the government is on the right track. I think we as an industry have to really work closely together to promote them, and I think the industry will follow the policy and really make this ecosystem click in the right direction. So back to you, Abhinav.
And how do we find, or where do you find startup ecosystem, particularly furthering the agenda, contributing, or even getting benefited? What role do they play, and what opportunities they may have?
So I think the startup ecosystem is it's definitely democratic. Definitely there is an impetus with COVID. Where the digitization is definitely improved. So I think it's and thirdly, I'll say the platforms are available, today.
Right.
My challenge to the startup companies is that when you look at devices, I don't know, Devita's operating system, right? What operating system is it? Is it Android? Is it Firefox? What is the operating system? So I think we are still scratching the surface when you develop apps. You got to go below and really challenge yourself into creating, really operating systems and platforms, and because India as a market is large enough,
Yeah.
With COVID and work from home, online learning, I mean, this has opened up all kinds of avenues for India and for the world. And I think the startups have an opportunity here, to really challenge themselves, work closely with the true need, and then try and develop it. Of course, the government is there, and I really think that the government is definitely providing a extremely conducive environment to drive that. And of course, I'll suggest that this is the area of, or this is the time of cooperation. Look for partners, look for suitable fits. My employer, we work with certain startups, and we partnered with the IIT Madras Research Park, and then I mean it's just fabulous. The kind of talent which is out there, I think it's fabulous. But you got to make the right partnerships, have the right aligned vision to drive this forward. But dig deep is my point. Back to you, Abhinav.
Thank you, George. That's very insightful. And I think some of the points which you certainly made could be a nudge to many of the audiences who would be listening in. So, as a quick summary, where we are in our discussion, so we did start with a broad theme of how we can plan for adopting some of the or most of the digital technology, especially from the social standpoint, where we had David speaking about it. And with Josh, we understood how one we can realize these strategies. What are we doing at national level? What policy intervention are there for making us realize this? With this, Alok, I would like to come to you now, and with your experience and with some of your philosophies which you would have adopted in Shriram, I would need your attention on talking something about, especially future of work, where we see the physical and the digital world coming together, especially when we think about how machines and humans can interface. And we know that disruptions are episodic in nature. They come and go, and each time they come, they are a bit either advanced or totally net new. So, in such environment, how does one prepare their workforce for the periods of flux, uncertainty, and how can they adopt for new ways of working? Alok, your
Thank you, Abhinav. First, I'd like to say I'm in this group the old man who's fully at sea in this whole industry 4.0. To give you a little background, when I started working, we were possibly at industry 1.0. We actually had machines which were steam driven,
that's right.
driven by overhead shafts running from leather straps and things like that. That was my first job. Then I went over to discrete in maybe industry 2.0, which was a production line sort of work. Then, as you know, DCM was the original competitor in the data space. We started off with DCM data products, and we were actually competitors to IBM originally in the 70s. So that was, I think, the days of mainframes and PCs and things like that. So I've been through all that. And the last 20 or 30 years, we've been trying very hard to work with automation and improving our industry efficiencies. Because as you know, we are in sort of the old world brick and mortar industry.
Yeah.
And, it's textiles, sugar, chemicals, things like that.
Yeah.
And a few years ago, I remember Mr. Ratan Tata making a statement that he wants to move his factories from brick and mortar to click and mortar.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we've been trying. We've been trying to bring in a lot of automation, computerization, and things in our factories to improve their efficiencies. But as you said, this is now a stage of disruption. Industry 4.0 is absolutely different from anything we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I think it gives rise to a lot of opportunities. I remember when I was working with Honda about 15 years ago, they had this whole concept of AI and ML, but maybe in a more human sense, in the sense that if there was a product which had a fault anywhere in India, we used to fix the fault, but we would also report back to Japan. And they had a data center which used to put together all these problems and would give you advice to how the problems could be solved. And I think ML is really part of that, is an extension of that. When in this stage of industry, we're trying to match the physical and cyber space all together and bring it down to be extremely efficient, lean, flexible, and cost efficient. I think this is a very big part of it. And that's where we are trying to go next. We're trying to put together all our machines in such a way that they not only throw out data which shows us where the fault is, but also can start rectifying those faults themselves. And for us, the biggest challenge is actually our human resource, because we have people at all levels of education, all levels of intelligence, all levels of skill sets. And I think it's a matter of retooling them. It takes a lot of time and effort, and I think it actually is possibly the best money we spend in retooling our human resources to take up the challenges which this new world is throwing. I think the disruptions are only starting. There will be so many more to come, and we have to strengthen the knowledge base and the skill sets of our employees.
Right.
I think that is where we are mostly uh, focusing our efforts. Apart from that, there is one sort of dichotomy which is coming in. Josh touched upon it briefly. Is that the government has done a great job, no doubt about it. But I think they've done a great job in a lot of number crunching areas.
Hmm.
On the application of AI in their processes, in the government processes, permissions and things like that, they're still way behind. So every industry and especially startups will face this problem of how to deal with this. You may have the best computer systems and programs, but when you got to go to a government servant to get a permission, there's a certain process, and for that you need experts who work on the basis of the amount of gray hair and experience they have with these systems. And how do you deal with this dichotomy? You have a set of youngsters who's very gung-ho and very forward looking, very intelligent, and understands it purely from a market driven point of view,
Yeah.
but there is this backup. And I think that is where the balance has to be done. I would advise all startups to take on people with gray hair who know the system as advisory, but keep the core of a business running for the business, for the market. Just be market driven. You have to be very focused. Also, I think a lot of businesses in India tend to think of their business as a private property, and they don't think of it as a lean manufacturing or productive organization. I think that is a focus which will have to change for all industries, all businesses. They will have to sort of keep a very clear distinction between business, ownership, and management. So
Thank
this is
you.
something that they need to look at. So I hope I've given a little insight into what I'm thinking.
Oh,
Thank you, Abhinav.
absolutely, and very rich. Thank you very much. I just so wish that we had more time. There's so much sitting out there in this panel to talk about, but I have last 2 minutes, and I just need quick bites from everyone. Let's say a rapid fire inputs for 1 minute. Um, Most of the time, at least in my very little experience, whenever we have spoken about digital-led investments with the boards, the often one of the prompt question comes is what would be my returns, and there are various instruments and mechanisms, vehicles to demonstrate that. However, personally, I have come to believe that this is a catch 22 game between the growth versus value. Does it add value? Does it help you grow, or is it somewhere in between? And that's my thought. But in your own experiences, how would you see the investments made into digital technologies? Does it necessarily have to qualify an ROI statement, or can that be seen beyond the tactical conversation of ROI as well? Anybody can go. Devita, do you want to go first, really quickly?
Well, sure. I mean, I do agree with Mr. Shriram's point. We've also been the ones who've been telling, I'm on the Prime Minister's Make in India committee, and I also mentioned that at the end of the day, our country needs to make more labs. But as he also rightly said, and Josh also touched upon it, is making sure that whatever investment is being done towards R&D, like is it being done towards sustaining your own business or sustaining being a leader in the industry, or do you also want to outsource those ideas and probably have the monetary value in the just pure R&D that you've done? So I think that has to be very clear. For us as a company, most of the IP that we do, we want to use it for our own balance sheet. We don't want to use it to sell the IP
Yeah.
outside. But sometimes maybe the IP has value for a larger industry, and so I think that's probably a call that an investor has to take along with business management, ownership, and different areas to say that, hey, is the ROI that you're going to get out of putting this R&D into product going to be better, or does the ROI come from the R&D standing on its own legs and us licensing this in a model across the globe to, I don't know, different vendors across the world?
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, this depends very much on the nature of the business. Sometimes you may also have as an exit and say that, look, maybe the R&D that you have developed works better as a sort of platform or something for companies across the board, and there's a chance to monetize that. But that decision again comes in from the ownership or who's put in the money. Maybe investors look at it differently. I own 100% of my
Yeah.
business. So
Thank
I'm more interested personally. I can only speak from a business owner's perspective. I'm more interested in seeing, hey, you know what, if I've done the research on it, first I want to make sure that people don't copy me, but then they do that all the time, is putting it into my product and making sure I build a business out of it than saying, hey, I want to make this open source. But then some of it also we tend to make it open source, especially where my team and I hit upon ideas which are more from a larger perspective. Hey, this is something that we've done that's good for the country, that's good for the world. We're happy to share this IP. But I would say decisions on ROI and on digital investment depends on the nature of investment and ownership within the company, and whether it's the product that's going to bring in the ROI or is it the R&D itself that can be monetized.
Thanks, Devita. Josh, a quick one from your side as well, please.
Digitization is very real. It's happening. I mean, in our ops, I think across India, everybody has gone with a zero touch philosophy.
Yeah.
So, digitizing of simple things, forms, verification, safety systems, you name it. So I think there is all kinds of applications when you just take the concept zero touch. So really, digitization is real, and I think we should look at great opportunities, use cases where you can apply these things. So all the best.
Thank you, Josh. I'm almost done with my time at my hand, and I can be so grateful to Devita, Alok, Josh for joining in. Thank you very much for your rich insights. Subbu, I would like to hand over back to you, and thank you on behalf of the panel for having us and discuss about the topic as well, Subbu.
Thank you, each and everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.